From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Shivani Joshi, and this is your news, sports, and weather update at noon on 1680 The Crow. VPD has released CCTV footage showing a suspect threatening another man with a knife last weekend. The victim has not yet reported the crime, but police are appealing for him to come forward. A witness called 911 reporting two men fighting on the street. Neither of the two men were injured. Anyone with information is asked to call VPD or Crime Stoppers. Slain Burnaby Mountie Constable Shaylin Yang is being remembered by members of the community as a compassionate person. Canadian Press reporter Karen Ribaud has more.
Burnaby's Chief Superintendent Graham de la Gorgendiere says Yang's death while doing outreach for mental health and homelessness is both senseless and tragic. Supervisors say Constable Yang was kind and compassionate. BC Solicitor General Mike Farnworth calls her death a horrific tragedy. Condolences have come in from all levels of government, from the Prime Minister on down to the Mayor of Burnaby. The Metro Vancouver Transit Police Department tweeted that outrage builds as our hearts break, adding our officers worked closely with Constable Yang and she will be deeply missed. Karen Ribaud, The Canadian Press.
Police say a suspect in Yang's death was shot and is in the hospital for non-life-threatening injuries. iHit has identified the two victims who were found dead inside a car on Monday. 24-year-old Keisha Gary and 30-year-old Umair Kasim were reported missing to Coquitlam RCMP before they were located in Burnaby. The car was found not far from Alpha Secondary School. Investigators say the victims were identified so that anyone with information or dashcam footage can come forward. NDP's Chief Electoral Officer Elizabeth Cole recommends disqualifying Anjali Appadurai from the leadership race. In a series of tweets after the report was released, Appadurai said her campaign was treated unjustly from the start.
These fears and these actions taken to sort of question and interrogate new members aside, I don't think that there's any other reason to question the legitimacy of my candidacy.
The NDP is scheduled to consider Cole's recommendation tonight. A statement from the party says that they will have no comment until then. If Appadurai is disqualified, David Eby will become the next leader of the NDP party. Skies are hazy across much of BC due to the wildfires, causing Environment Canada to issue a special air quality statement. The warnings cover Metro Vancouver, Vancouver Island, and the Kootenays. They recommend reducing exposure to smoke and say individuals with respiratory infections like COVID-19 are most likely to feel the effects. The BC Wildfire Service says that skies should be clearing up beginning Thursday. Halloween celebrations will be dampened in the district of Saanich due to high risk of fire and the ongoing drought. Even with rain in the forecast, the Central Saanich Fire Chief, Ken Mount, says the risk of fire remains too high. Mount wants to remind residents that all fireworks and open burning are still banned. The drought is also impacting many businesses on the Sunshine Coast, another challenge after years of COVID-19 restrictions. The region has banned water usage for non-essential commercial businesses. Vancity says it's offering a carbon footprint credit card. This program will allow credit card holders to track the carbon emissions of their purchases. The Vancouver-based credit union says they're partnering with a German fintech company to offer this tool, and they will be the first to offer a Visa-based carbon footprint calculator in the new year. Granville Island is hosting the 35th annual Vancouver's Writers Fest this week. Reporter Victor Gaucher has more on how the Vancouver Writers Fest helps kids get interested in reading and writing.
Some of the best and most decorated authors from around the world are descending on Vancouver's Granville Island for the 35th Vancouver Writers Fest. According to Leslie Hertig, the festival's artistic director, introducing children to literary works is one of the most important aspects of the festival.
We have a series called Writers in the Classroom, where we send up to 30 authors a year into classes around the Lower Mainland to do workshops with all ages of kids. And we also have youth programming during Festival Week here as well, where we see school buses streaming down to the island to attend field trips.
Running from October 17th to the 23rd, the Vancouver Writers Fest aims to create a more educated and empathetic population, one story at a time. Victor Gaucher, 1680, The Crow.
We are now joined by reporter Victor Gaucher. Victor, what kinds of events are taking place during Festival Week?
Hi, Shivani. The festival hosts many events, such as an author brunch and afternoon high tea, where authors from around the world read their work aloud.
And is there a particular theme to the festival this year?
There is. The festival has invited the 2021 Scotiabank Giller Prize winner and international best-selling author Omar El-Akkad to curate 6 events that all share a common theme of what home and community are and how significant they are.
Thank you,
Shivani.
Victor. It is day 5 of the inquiry looking into the federal government's implementation of the Emergencies Act in February. Ottawa Councillor Diane Deans is testifying about the police and city's response to the protest.
He said to me, "What are you so worried about?" And I told him just what I told you, the number of trucks, the size of those trucks, the amount of money that they have. And he said that he would be surprised if they were still here on Monday.
3 weeks after the meeting, then Police Chief Peter Slowly resigned, and Deans was ousted as chair of the police board by her city council colleagues. Statistics Canada says the annual inflation rate dropped slightly in September as the cost of groceries continues to rise. Canadian Press reporter John Kennedy has the details.
In its latest Consumer Price Index report, the federal agency says the slight deceleration from 7% in August is mostly attributed to lower gas prices. Gas prices fell by 7.4% in September from a month prior, while grocery prices rose at the fastest rate since August 1981, up 11.4% compared year over year. Statistics Canada says food prices have outstretched the overall inflation rate for 10 consecutive months. John Kennedy, the Canadian Press.
Florida is issuing a warning over flesh-eating bacteria after Hurricane Ian. Associated Press reporter Ben Thomas has more.
Florida's Department of Health says there's been an increase in reports of flesh-eating bacteria this year. 65 cases and 11 deaths from Vibrio vulnificus infections, up from 34 cases and 10 deaths for all of last year. And it's been largely driven by a surge in Lee County, where Hurricane Ian came ashore last month. The health department reports 29 cases and 4 deaths there this year. However, the figures do not reflect how many of the cases were before or after Ian struck. Still, Lee County has warned people that the post-hurricane environment, including warm standing water, could pose a danger from the deadly bacteria. I'm Ben Thomas.
The Canucks announced today they are playing forward Philip DeGiuseppe on waivers, designated him to his AHL affiliate, the Abbotsford Canucks. DeGiuseppe has not played a game for the team this season, but did make the opening night roster. The Canucks have not won a game thus far. In the Canadian Elite Basketball League, the new name for Calgary's team has been announced, the Calgary Surge. The team was previously known as the Gulf Nighthawks before being relocated to Calgary. The name was decided by an open survey for fans, which led to the name Surge. Calgary actor Andrew Fung unveiled the team's name and logo to the public for the first time today. The next CEBL season tips off in May 2023. In the NBA, the Toronto Raptors opened their season today at 4:30 against the Cleveland Cavaliers at home. In other NBA news, Jamal Murray has finally recovered from an 18-month-long injury. Reporter Kyle Collis has more.
The Canadian basketball star will be making his return to the NBA today in the Denver Nuggets season opener. The Kitchener, Ontario local missed the last 28 games of the 2020 NBA season as well as the entire 2021 season due to a torn ACL. Murray is currently on the 3rd year of his 5-year, $158 million contract. The Nuggets will tip off at 6 p.m. this evening against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Kyle Collis, 1680, The Crow.
In MLB action, there are 2 games slated to go today. The San Diego Padres are taking on the Philadelphia Phillies. And on the American League side, the New York Yankees, fresh off a victory last evening, will be taking on the first-place Houston Astros. It's currently 14 degrees and partly cloudy this afternoon in Burnaby. Thursday showing cloudy with a high of 16 degrees. This was your news and weather update at 12. I'm Shivani Joshi on 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
It's extremely important for people to stay healthy and to stay active as much as possible.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. but it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Companion Call here on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. I'm your host, Victor Gaucher, and I'm joined today by Keisha Cleaver and Rohan Karnik. Today we'll be discussing the barriers women, LGBTQ2+, and BIPOC people have faced as they enter the brewing industry, as well as what steps are being taken in order to make the brewing industry a more welcoming environment. Keisha is a host of the East Van Beer Wife podcast, and she currently writes policy and codes of conducts for breweries, and her focus is on celebrating women in beer and inclusivity for all. Rohan Karnik is co-founder and beer broker, or director of sales, for Shaketown Brewing in North Vancouver. Rohan and his good friend Ryan Schultz started Shaketown with hope of becoming a great spot within his local community. Keisha, Rohan, thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
How are we doing?
Doing great. This is great.
Yeah. Good. Glad you could be here. So briefly, Keisha, we'll start with you. Where did your passion for beer come from?
It's funny because I am almost 13 years sober and I didn't drink beer at all. And then I met my now husband, Travis, 7 years ago, and he was making moonshine in his kitchen when I met him and was just getting into brewing. And he was just a guy with a pot in our kitchen and started brewing, and he loved it so much. And he was doing graphic design for almost 20 years at that point and was just tired of sitting at a desk all day, and he's like, I want to roll the dice on this. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So quit his graphic design job and started brewing, and he got a job at a brewery, Monkey 9 in Richmond, and they didn't really have anybody managing the brew house at the time. And he's like, I don't know how to do bookkeeping, I don't know how to do any of the stuff the government needs us to do. So I was like, well, let me figure it out. And then I just started managing the brew house and doing all the day-to-day ordering and excise and all that stuff you need to make it so the government doesn't shut you down. And so I started attending more and more beer events because of that, and noticing a real gap in women in the industry. And COVID hit and everyone lost jobs, and Monkey 9 actually ended up closing during COVID instead of staying open and going to a delivery model. So I was just sitting like on my deck one night with Travis joking around that I should start a podcast about all the brewers' wives and like complaining about like having grain in your car and like you having to go pick up your husband because he's too drunk. And then someone was like, and then I started like sending out messages to like all the brewers' wives, be like, hey, let's do this, like East Van Beer Wives. And then it became more women reaching out to me, being like, something's wrong, like I can't get any jobs, or I can't reach like the grain mill, or this doesn't feel like a safe space for me. So then I just started interviewing women in the industry who were noticing gaps within the industry for women and for people of color and for the LGBTQ2S+ community. So it turned into more of uniting women to support them, and calling out breweries that weren't safe spaces so people knew where they could go. And I did that for about a year, and then it was a lot. So I took a step back from the podcast, and now I help breweries become like safer spaces. And I've been working with one brewery that's going to be opening in Kelowna in the spring, because they're on West Bank First Nation. So they want to really bring in a lot of Indigenous culture into the brewery. So I'm doing consulting with that and helping write codes of conduct. And so I'm still in the beer industry, just in a way different way, and just trying to shake it up and having a real good time doing it.
That's awesome. And Rohan, when did you start to like beer?
Oh, I might get my dad in trouble for this, but maybe 12 years old, he gave me a sip of his beer, and I thought it was disgusting. And then, I mean, I've always drank beer. Never thought I'd own a brewery, to be honest with you. Like you said, my business partner, Ryan Schultz, approached me. He's always wanted to open a distillery or a brewery. And when North Van rezoned for breweries in 2019, the light bulb kind of went in his head. He approached me because we've known each other for about 25 years. Always wanted to do something together, and honestly, the first reaction when he said, "Do you want to open a brewery with me?" I was like, "I don't know anything about selling beer. I can drink beer, but I can't." So he's like, "You've always been in sales. I'm sure you can sell beer." And that's how I kind of fell into it. It was, I've always drank it, but I'd say the last, because we've only been open for 6.5 months, but it's been a 2-year project. My mind has just expanded about how great beer can be.
That's awesome. Because you're so new into the industry, have you experienced any hardships yourself trying to break in?
Honestly, for me, my personal experience is, so I used to be a hospital fundraiser for about 6 years. I got into that because I was in sales and I hated the cutthroat of the industry I was currently in. And I thought nonprofit would be the most lovey-dovey industry. Not sadly, but weirdly so, it's probably more cutthroat. It's the most cutthroat industry I've ever been in. Mainly because there are private foundations, family foundations popping up every day. But the pie of money you're going after in any city is the same size. So I did that for about 5-6 years, and then got into the beer industry. And the beer industry is probably the most welcoming industry I've ever been in. From the get-go, other breweries around us, like House of Funk and North Point, the owners are there, really took us under their wing. When we were putting just even our budget together, Darren from House of Funk literally opened up his laptop at a lunch and said, "What do you guys want to see?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "My projections before we open, my 3 months after, my 6 months after." And I think he saw my jaw was on the ground. And he was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "We're technically competitors. Why are you helping us?" And he's like, "Because that's what we do in this industry. We help each other out. If someone needs something, we help them out." He was like, "There was someone there when I was starting out that helped me out. So I basically asked them, how can I help you back?" And he said, "Just pay it forward." So that's a big part of us, is anyone that's new to the industry, we're always happy to help. And that's what I love about the industry.
That's awesome. I was always kind of wondering that, because there seems to be a new brewery popping up every other day or so, and only so much beer can be drank, I'm sure. So I always wondered how.
Yeah, but there's no competition about it. There's always room for more. I know, like, the East Van market is pretty, like, oversaturated, but I don't think anyone's doing terribly. I know COVID hit very hard, and I think we're just still climbing out of that. And but I know, like, for Trav, if he calls someone, I know he calls David at Powell all the time and is like, "I need this," or "I need yeast," and David's always great. And I know Travis's grain barrels just got stolen last week, all 8 of them. So he just started calling breweries to be like, "I'm brewing and need grain barrels." And it's really just like, you help each other out a lot, and just like lift each other up, because the beer is for everyone, and it's no one's fighting over supplies or anything.
Or customers even.
Or customers, I know.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the brewing industry, from brewery to brewery, is welcoming to the owners and the staff for the most part. What kind of steps do you think have been taken or need to be taken in order to make it a safer space for all customers and all people as well?
Yeah, I think it's so funny, because the brewing industry is so welcoming and so inclusive, and everybody's like, I personally never feel unsafe walking into a space. But then I hear from customers who don't know the people in the industry, they don't have that same feeling. And I think it's just because the brewing industry has become a very, like, white, male, cis dominated industry. So that's the kind of people you will attract if that's who everyone is, like, the poster of your establishment is. And same thing, like, with beer festivals, everyone looks the same. Everybody's named Dave.
Our brewmaster's name's Dave.
Travis knows like 8 Daves, and he has to always be like, "Oh no, it's this Dave or Hop Dave," and it's So I think if that's who your poster people are for your business, that's who you're going to attract. So I know that can be really hard for people of color or for women going into a space when they don't see anybody who looks like them. I know I've talked about this a lot, like, on my podcast, like, going to beer festivals, especially, like, to BC Beer Awards, which is my favorite event of the year. I'm so excited. We're, like, less than a month away. But being in a circle of people, especially when I was working for a brewery and we were up for awards, and, like, I had just the right amount, or what am I looking for? I had the right to be there like everybody else who was in the room, but all of the white men in the circle were talking over me and above me, and again, like no one can see me, but I'm very little, so it was easy for all of these men in the circle to be able to overlook me, and I'm like, I had as much to do with this process as everybody here, and like this win is as much like Travis's win as it is mine, because we did this whole thing together. Like, yes, he brewed the beer, but he would be brewing the beer for no one if someone wasn't running the show. So it's really like people who are in the industry really have to lift up women and people of color and queer people, because if the white bearded men of the beer world aren't lifting up other people, then there's no one there to lift them up. We can't lift up ourselves. So
right.
Yeah.
Why is it important to kind of steer away from the typical beer is a man's drink and only bearded guys named Dave can drink it? Why is it important to kind of create a space for everyone?
I mean, I think that's just a lesson for life in any industry, not just for the beer world. I think the old boys club is hopefully a thing of the past. I think people are being aware that it doesn't matter where you're from, your sexual orientation. If you like beer, you like beer. Doesn't matter what you look like, the only thing that, at least for us too, when we're hiring people, we just care about your qualifications. And honestly, not even qualifications. If you have a good attitude, we can teach you anything. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, anything, any sexual orientation, we don't care. We care about the person. And I think that's where the industry is going. It's taken a long time to get there, but I think we're on the right path, and people are realizing. And I think the biggest thing is people are talking, the ones that were affected. And that's in anything. When you're the victim, you always feel like it's your fault if you say something. I think the beer industry is starting to let people know if something's affecting you, if something's happened to you, you should be vocal about it. And you will find there's a lot of people, more people than they probably think, that will be by your side supporting you.
Yeah. And also, by not making your space safe for people other than like white bearded men, if you think about it from a sales perspective, you're losing a huge target audience that you could make money from. So I know it's not all about capitalism, but if you're running a business, the more people who want to come and support your business, the better it's going to be for your business. Yeah. So that's like only like marketing 101. Like you.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak to that, even going into putting the brewery together, we knew people who drank beer would drink our beer. Mainly because our brewmaster, Dave, he has a small beard, not a big beard. He's been doing this for 25, 30 years. He's very well known in the industry. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
People that drink your beer will drink your beer.
So we knew people would drink his beer. But we were like, how do we tap the people that don't drink our beer?
Yeah.
And I asked a lot of my friends, guys and girls who don't drink beer, I'm like, why don't you drink beer? And they're like, oh, because every beer tastes hoppy. And they think every beer is an 8% IPA.
And hazy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we're trying to change that narrative that beers are not all taste the same. We're really, every time because we have cider that we get from a cidery in Gibson's, we have wine for people who don't drink. But whenever people come up and order one of those, we get our staff to ask them, why don't you like beer? A lot of the time people are like gluten, and we get that. But some people are like, I just don't like the taste. And then that's when we tell our staff, just give them a little taster of this one or this one, this one. And the look on their faces when they're like, oh, this doesn't taste like a tree. Like, this is actually really good. There's a lot of flavor notes. So we're trying to get those people who don't drink beer to drink beer, because there's a really big untapped market. And what Keisha said, at the end of the day, it's how can we make more money for a business.
Oh, for sure. And like for me, someone who doesn't drink at all, like I taste everything that Travis brews, or if we go into a place and like I do my podcast, I'll taste everything. But I'm someone who lives like a mostly sober existence. I can't sit and drink a whole pint of something, but I want to go to spaces that has alternatives for me as well. So like the fancy pops, I call them, or there's the Ednas now, which are the no alcohol cocktails, which are fantastic. And also being a woman who's also a mother, I also look, is this a space I can bring my kid to? Because if I can't bring my kid to it, then I'm not going to go to it. So is there a change table? Is there somewhere before? Could I park my stroller? And some spaces, like even though we loved them, weren't safe to bring our kid to. So then that also is a whole untapped market of family, especially in East Van. And even where you are in North Van, you've got the families. And if families can't come into your space, that's also you're losing a huge market. So like trying to make spaces as safe and inclusive for everyone. And if also if a stroller can't fit into your space, a wheelchair can't fit into your space.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you're losing that that whole community.
Right. Rohan, you kind of touched on it earlier by saying that the beer market the beer industry has gone a long way away from the old times to being more inclusive, but obviously they still have a long ways to go. What steps do you think need to be taken immediately in order to get us to that space? Is it just the more breweries? Because the relationship between brewery to brewery seems very strong and very welcoming. So is it just the more breweries, the better?
Possibly. I think at the end of the day, it's education. Informing people that just because this person looks a certain way doesn't mean they like these certain things. Like there's a girl out in Ontario, Jen Navarro, who's kind of at the forefront of bringing diversity to the brewery world. And it's just talking to her, and she's like, I thought I was well educated of this topic, and the more I talk to her, the more I realize there's so much more for me to learn. And yeah, I think it's just education and the willing to want to learn and get out of your comfort zone. I think is the biggest part that we can do to really push this past the next level.
Yeah, Ren with
Sorry, Ren Navarro.
Yeah, Ren Navarro. You did, but that's okay.
Sorry, Ren Navarro.
Yeah, beer diversity.
Yeah.
She's amazing. When there was a brewery in East Van that got called out like real hard last year, and they hired her to come in, and they fly her in almost every month to do a lot of work with their staff and with their owners to change their space. I think they tried a little hard in the beginning, and it looked a little fake, but they're doing really well now, and they're really making strides and trying to make the spaces as safe as possible. And I think they came back from the call out. There are some breweries I don't think would come back from a call out as big as that they received, but they did a lot of work. And yeah, flying Ren out, and she's fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, so she's beer diversity on Instagram, and that's her whole job is making beer safe for everyone. And yeah, she's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like we just need to get more breweries in the industry, but also just educate people as a whole. I really want to thank you guys for your time. You guys had some great discussions. I just have one final question for you, Rohan. What is your favorite beer at this moment?
Okay, so everyone asks me that every day.
I asked that on my podcast too, and it was such a hard question. So
and I'll give you the same answer I give everyone. That's like asking me who's my favorite child.
Yes.
Different day, different choice.
Yeah. Beer of the moment is what I ended up going with.
Okay.
Yeah.
But right now, I'd have to say, so if it's our own beer, which I'll say, and then I'll maybe give you another one I really enjoy. Dave just made a couple months ago a grisette, which is like a lower percentage saison. Okay. But he made it with Szechuan peppercorns and blood orange. And at first you don't think that sounds good because you're like, why would you put Szechuan peppercorns in a beer? It is out of this world. Yeah.
Okay.
And then kind of my go-to because there's so many beers sometimes on a beer list or at a beer store, my go-to is always Twin Sails Dat Juice.
Oh, yeah.
Classic. That's a classic, great one. Yeah.
Keisha, I was going to ask you the same question, but because you don't really drink beer, I'm going to frame it a little differently.
Yeah.
What is your favorite brewery at the moment?
Oh, see, that's...
Shakedown.
Shakedown. I am going to say I haven't made it over to your space yet. I know Trav does the North End Brewery Tours with the baby or the toddler whenever I'm busy. My brewery of the moment... I know this isn't a brewery. I really like Steamworks' new space on Main Street. It's amazing. You can have dogs on the patio, and it's fantastic, and I love it.
Awesome.
But my brewery of the moment would have to be R&B. Because their pizzas are really great, and they are okay with my toddler standing on the table and reading books out loud to the entire brewery. And they have a change table in every bathroom, so that's really helpful. Good. And Rick and Barry are just like fantastic, and they've been in the industry for so long. And but yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. All right, well, thank you for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
shoes on. Like, if I leave them on, I ruin the streak of the last, 10 years of never wearing shoes where I work. I do all kinds of tattoos, whatever the customer asks for mostly. But lately I've been doing mostly form line style of indigenous tattoos. I'm Métis on my dad's side, but I was raised by my mom. So I didn't grow up with a huge personal connection to my indigenous ancestry. But as I started doing more indigenous tattoos, that kind of got me a little bit more interested in finding more about my own history.
Hari Tundo, Tatemusli, Saschosli, Nadle Witen Yinka Dene Dakes. In my language, that means my name is Randall Bear Barnettson. I come from the Bear Clan, the village of Nadle, and of the Dakes First Nation. That's my nation. On the back tattoo, I think it's been about 12 hours now, I would say. 10 to 12 hours. On my left arm here, I have the bear for Dentemu, my Bear Clan. And then I have the Thunderbirds on the middle, and then the double eagles on the bottom. So this is for my Dakes people on my mother's side. And then also the double eagles for my Newhawk family, and then the Thunderbirds for my father's side. His crest was a Thunderbird. So that's why I have the Thunderbird on my back as well, along with the bear. Since time immemorial, we would commission an artist to do a clan design or a crest for us in our community. We'd go to a local artist and ask them to do a design for our clan or community to represent ourselves, our family, our community, our nation.
Adi, Ani, Sasan, welcome to my studio.
So my tattoos, they all represent that, from my Bear Clan to my Thunderbirds to my Eagle Clan. They represent and they place me in my community and show my affiliation there. And so that's why I love working with Logan, because Logan, he helps me to kind of embody these teachings in these clans and crests, and he really contextualizes these teachings that we have. And then on this side, I got the East Van cross, because where I was born, East Van. So I kind of go between two, because traditionally, land and people are the most important things to us as traditional indigenous people. So when I turned 18, I was like, I'm going to get the East Van cross on my arm. I'm going to go to do it. I went to a tattoo artist, and he said, nah, come back in a couple of years when you figure it out a bit more. And I was like, what the hell, man? I want to get tattooed. And he was like, nah, think about it some more, come back. And then I waited a decade, and Logan did it for me.
My name is Shanton Hopkins. I am a tattoo artist here at East Van Warren Tattoo Company. Born and raised in East Vancouver. I am Indigenous to Darcy Anderson Lake, better known to us as the Naquaqua people. It's part of the Stallion Nation. So growing up, I was a pretty rebellious kid. Just always getting into trouble, getting into fights, drinking, stealing cars when I was 12. Went to jail when I was 14. It's just a lot of pain and trauma from my mother. She was an alcoholic who dealt with her generational trauma from my grandmother, who was in residential school. So just trickled down, passed down to me, right? But me and myself, I've been doing a lot of work on myself. I've been sober now for 3 years. Trying to break the chain and the link for my kids, right? So my style, I like to stick with a realism, black and gray, but I like to try to incorporate a native form line art to it. So I do my own West Coast style, form line, native art with the realism. Yeah, it's just sort of a unique touch that I wanted to come up with. For me, I always wanted to sort of incorporate like the native art inside of my tattoo work. And black and gray realism is something that I always wanted to pursue. I want to keep that style of art alive. I want to keep the form line art alive, right? It's been here already for centuries. Even though it's been tweaked a little bit, whatever, like all artists have their own styles of their own art, right? Well, we have all kinds of different backgrounds getting like Oriental Japanese style sleeves. I tattooed this native guy just last week. We did a full native realism piece on his arm, full sleeve. He already had an existing like Oriental Japanese style dragon on his other arm, right? I'm like, yeah, if like you have like enough love and respect for the culture, like I don't see why it would be an issue for anybody to want to get like form line native art tattooed on their bodies, right? If it's nothing but love and respect, that's all that matters, right?
I think it's really complicated. It's non-Indigenous people, unless there's like, the way I was taught is if there's a story, connection to the story, and you go about it in a good way, as you do work with an Indigenous artist, and you go about the proper protocols, and you know the story and the connection there, then it's more acceptable. However, if you get a clan design or a clan crest, then that has such larger meaning behind it, and affiliation too, like I said, to place, community, to people. And you're essentially saying that you are part of them. And that's a tough thing to claim. And we always say it's not who you claim, but who claims you.
It's a little controversial, and it's everybody has a differing viewpoint. And for me, it's different client to client. Like sometimes, like I have some European tourist that's like, yeah, I want this salmon because I'm in Canada. And in that case, like, you know, go home and think about it a little bit, do a little bit of research. But other times, like I've tattooed white people that have been adopted by a nation and have lived their whole life on reserve and around Indigenous art and Indigenous people, and they want to honor that. And I think that's dope too.
Bar down over there is like, was a strip club and very much like a biker skittish kind of hangout. My dad's stories about Steveston are a lot different than what my feelings about Steveston.
I see Indigenous tattooing kind of flourishing even more. Just the artwork in itself is becoming more and more popular. People are more down to collect fine art and that sort of thing. Like I know the Canucks are having warm-up jerseys done by an Indigenous artist. So it's kind of in people's faces so much more, and it's so much more like widely accepted. And yeah, I think the future is bright for Indigenous tattooers, for sure.
Does it feel?
Yeah.
Greatest feeling.
Natalia for showcasing Logan and traditional tattooing and traditional Indigenous art, and having this be a part of the conversation and bringing us to the table in that. So, Natalia in my language means thank you for everything you've done for us.
I was just gonna go do my own thing, but then I ended up, there's something in me that just stopped, and I sat on the curb and I just started crying, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what? This is just, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm Amberlina Murray. I'm 33 years old, and I was raised in Port Coquitlam. So I was 9 years old when I started smoking weed, but it quickly, like between 9 and 10, probably 10 or 11 is when I started getting into ecstasy and cocaine and more of the harder drugs. I was fully addicted to crystal meth when I was, I would say 13 is when I was fully addicted to it. I was born with a very sick mother, so I was born addicted already. And then my whole childhood was full of abuse and anger and my mom being sick and having to watch over her, as well as she lived in the hospital pretty much in nursing homes because she couldn't care for herself.
What happened with Amber's mom and Amber is an absolute tragedy, and no child should have to go through that, and it breaks my heart.
So we didn't have like a good relationship at all. My dad, I was always daddy's little girl, but at the same time there was not much my dad could do because he was so focused on taking care of my mom, like he was her caretaker. I think he was at a point in his life where he just didn't know what to do. His life was so chaotic with this one woman that he didn't even know how to deal with his daughter who was addicted to drugs. As soon as I started smoking weed with friends at a youth center or started doing ecstasy, or the one thing that came to mind was I didn't have to feel anymore. Like those feelings were gone. Like I didn't feel pain, I didn't feel anything. And it was an amazing feeling. Finally, once in my life, I could turn to something that I didn't have to feel. It was when I had kids is when I realized I had a problem. I got clean at 15, 16. I stayed clean. I had the two older kids, Savannah and Caden. And then I split up from I left their dad. And all I knew was that little family. Like that meant the world to me. When we split up, I went right back into addiction and left the kids with my dad and their dad. And I didn't get clean until my youngest kid's dad came in the picture. And I only stayed clean because I got pregnant right away. I had no idea how to even get like a month or 2 months. 2 months was probably my longest. And then I just kept relapsing. I was definitely loaded there. And we went to the P&E and I couldn't even handle it for like 2 seconds. I was in the bathroom like the whole time. Like I was a shitty human being, like shitty. Like I was not a nice person unless I wanted something. That was the only time I was nice. And as soon as I got it, you wouldn't see me again. Like I just, totally opposite person than who I am off drugs. And that's just how it is when you want to get clean, it's like, you want to get clean, but your head's like so powerful in that moment when you start detoxing that it's like crippling. And so I talked myself into making a phone call. And when I asked to make a phone call, they said, if you make the phone call, you need to leave right now. And I still decided to make the phone call. And there was no pickup from my dealer. So they kicked me out anyway. The recovery house, a lot of them I got banned from continuing to come back and not staying clean. Not from anything bad I did, but because of not staying clean. Like some places are just like, like you're clearly not getting it, so maybe go to a different place.
She had nobody and she was alone. And I remember everybody coming up to me and saying, hey, don't waste your time. You know what? She's just going to end up doing this, or this. And I can understand where they were coming from, right? Because a lot of people had invested a lot into Amber, and Amber made unhealthy choices, but that's to be expected by somebody that is in addiction, right?
I have overdosed 4 times. The very first time I overdosed, it was actually my kids who found me in the living room, as I was still living with my youngest kid's dad at the time. And he ended up calling, they started screaming, and then he ended up calling an ambulance and stuff. And then I went code blue in the ambulance. I was able to make it through, thankfully, but yeah, that was probably like my lowest. There's something in me that just stopped, And I sat on the curb and I just started crying. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what? This is just, I don't want to do this anymore. I remember being in like recovery for like in a recovery house for like the 6th time, and I had a weekend, or not a weekend, but my youngest kid's dad brought them all to me to have like an hour visit. And I remember like that so clearly, that they were leaving, and this is after about 6 months and not seeing them at all because I was in addiction, and then the recovery house I was in, you can't see anyone for a month. So he came and brought them, and when they were leaving, all 3 of them were like screaming and crying and like would not let go of me at all. Where the staff at the house had to come out and pry them off me, and I like cried for days.
I just didn't want to let go, and I wanted to stay with her, and I just wanted her to come back home with us. I just felt really sad because I didn't understand why my mom couldn't come see us and why we always had to come see her.
It's heartbreaking. It's like, I'm doing this. Like, I'm doing this by not putting the work into me and continuing to use. I'm causing so much trauma in my kids that I grew up with. And I mean, they're floating around house to house like there's no stability at all. So, and no one's gonna love them the way that I love them.
Because of my chronic relapsing, to help me stay in the houses, of writing what the kids would say to me. I love you, Mommy, and I want you to stay there and get the help you need, so when you come home, we can laugh and have fun again together.
Like, addiction took everything from me, like my ability to be a mom, my ability to know how to even love on my kids. Like, I didn't know how to hug my kids anymore. Like, that natural mom instincts were gone. Like, I had to relearn all that through my recovery. It took me a long time to even talk about my mom, like before I got clean this time, but I knew if I wanted to stay clean this time, I had to talk about her. So like prior to this, like I just hated her. Like I thought she ruined my whole life. Because I knew like deep down that if I didn't have a mom like that, I probably would have had a better chance in life.
Yeah, myself and one other woman in this.
I did feel like the kids deserved to know why they went through what they did. And also deserve to know, like, and also sharing my experience with them maybe help them for their future. And if my parents shared with me their experience, I would have known what a Narcotics Anonymous was. I would have known what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I would have known where to go to get help.
I think it's amazing that Amber is like super honest with them and super transparent. And but I also think that Amber does that because she wants to make sure that they understand that, you know, this is what happens and these are the consequences.
You're going out with Auntie Sunday morning.
What day am I? She understands what she put us through, and I feel like she tries to make up for it all the time. But like now, there's nothing really to make up for anymore.
So this is something I keep, and it's like all my medallions over the years.
From the broadcast center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Angelina Mintz here with your sports and weather updates to 1 p.m. The Canucks announced today they are placing forward Philip DiGiuseppe on waivers, designating him to their AHL affiliate, the Abbotsford Canucks. DiGiuseppe has not played a single game yet for the team this season, but did make the opening night roster. The Canucks have not won a game this season thus far, but will get a chance to change that tomorrow when they take on the Minnesota Wild. In other NHL news, the Calgary Flames have re-begun talks with the city of Calgary regarding a new arena. The previous arena deal, which was agreed upon in 2019, fell apart last year when the cost became too high. Shovels were expected to hit the ground this year for a new 19,000-seat hockey arena to replace the Saddle Dome. The initial estimate of the new arena was $550 million, split between two parties, but has now increased to $634 million. In MLB action, there are two games slated to go today. In the National League, the San Diego Padres will be taking on the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies captured the victory in Game 1 after a 2-0 win, and Phillies star Bryce Harper says it was a huge win for them to start the series.
Yeah, it's huge. Anytime you go up 1-0 and kind of take home field advantage away from them is always big for you. You know, that's what we kind of talk about, just coming in, you know, just trying to win games no matter what at all costs. So I thought that was a big win today.
Game 2 is set to start shortly at 1:37 Pacific time. On the American League side, the New York Yankees, fresh off a victory last evening, will be taking on the first-place Houston Astros. The Yankees will be sending right-handed pitcher Jameson Taillon to the mound to face off against Astros ace Justin Verlander. Yankees manager Aaron Boone says it has been an uphill battle through the postseason so far.
Ups, downs, challenges, good times, bad times, adversity is all coming for you in a season, and it certainly did for us. You know, obviously getting off to a great start and then really hitting, you know, some tough times. You know, injuries, really struggled there over a 4 to 6 week period. But these guys never stop believing, or, you know, it's just like, all right, we'll get through this.
First pitch is scheduled for 4:37 from Houston. In basketball news, Canadian NBA star Jamal Murray has finally recovered from an 18-month-long injury and will be in action again tonight. Our reporter Kyle Collis has more.
The Canadian basketball star will be making his return to the NBA today in the Denver Nuggets season opener. The Kitchener, Ontario local missed the last 28 games of the 2020 NBA season as well as the entire 2021 season due to a torn ACL. Murray is currently on the third year of his 5-year, $158 million contract. The Nuggets will tip off at 6 p.m. this evening against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Kyle Collis, 1680, The Crow.
The lone Canadian squad, the Toronto Raptors, will also kick off their season at home this evening against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Staying with basketball, the Canadian Elite Basketball League has announced a new team, the Calgary Surge. The team was previously known as the Guelph Nighthawks before being relocated and rebranded to Calgary. The name was chosen by an online campaign where the Surge was eventually decided on. Calgarian actor Andrew Fung unveiled the team's name and logo to the public for the first time today. The next CEBL season tips off in May of 2023. Canadian tennis star Denis Shapovalov will play in the Stockholm Open quarterfinals after a win earlier today. Shapovalov knocked off Antoine Bellier in straight sets to advance. Shapovalov also received a bye in the second round as he was the 4th-seeded player in the tournament. His next match is set to be played on Thursday. On the women's side, Canadian Jeannie Bouchard has been eliminated in the second round of the Guadalajara Open. She won her opening match in straight sets before falling to Yelena Ostapenko earlier in round 2. With her elimination, Bianca Andreescu remains the lone Canadian woman left in the tournament. And Volleyball Canada has parted ways with their men's team head coach, Ben Josephine. Josephine, who is a native of Langley, took over the position in April after being named to the position in November. Canada's team recently placed 17th at the World Championships after being eliminated in the first round of competition. Those were your sports updates to 1 p.m. I'm Angelina Mintz, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.